Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I, 43 female, am a learned landscape gardener, but due to an accident many years ago can no longer work the actual craft. In 2020, after 12 years of being a stay-at-home mom, I began working in the office of a quite large landscaping firm. My position was assistant to management, with Jack, one of the COOs, as my direct boss. At the time, I did mostly supporting paperwork. A couple of months later, the company hired Becky as a junior manager. She had just finished her master's degree, and this was her first real job, so she had a lot to learn and to gain experience. In the beginning, she relied on me for the paperwork and how our programs worked, and I thought we got along well, even though we were as different as two people can be. In spring 2021, there were some changes made. For once, our whole department moved to new office rooms, and Picky and I were put in the same office. Also, I was taken out to day-to-day paperwork to work exclusively on surveying, to get all the measurements needed to correctly bill our clients. About that time, our problem started. I'm on the ADHD spectrum, so I have habits of unconsciously fiddling or talking to myself and other stuff that unnerved her. She needed absolute quiet while working, whereas I preferred to hear music over headphones. Every time she told me something I did would disturb her, I tried to stop myself from doing that, be it mumbling, listening to music while she's in the office, even drinking coffee because your slurping is disgusting. Coffee is hot, duh. I was not allowed to comment on anything concerning her. I'm a terribly curious person. And so on. Even though I love my job and anyone else in the company, that daily repression made me not want to go to work in the morning. It came to a fast head when one of our foremen was in the office. She gave him a task and he was annoyed. And I made a fun little comment that made the foreman chuckle, lightened his mood as intended. But after he'd left, she exploded on me how dare I undermine her authority, and how disrespectful of her position and person I was. After all, she was a manager, junior but who counts, and I was merely the assistant. She went to Jack to complain about me, how she could not work with me when I was so obnoxious, yada yada. Long story short, Jack is super chill boss. He talked to me to hear my side. And 3 days later, I moved all my stuff into another smaller office where I work ever since. As I mentioned, I do the surveying for all the managers' projects who need it. Also for Becky, and she was very particular in how the plans had to be laid out, which items had to be on them, and so on. So when I did a survey and drafted the plans, we had to have several discussions and corrections about minute details none of the other managers cared about. Everybody else, when I had a question regarding their projects, I would go to their office, see if they were free and ask for the information that I needed. If I could not draw it from the documentation. But not with Becky. She demanded I make appointments with her to schedule meetings to talk about these issues that dragged work on her projects to absurd lengths. Also, she would give me deadlines for finishing, and then take 1 to 4 weeks before even looking at what I had made. Then she would want to discuss it. When I was already at the next project over, it was a pain. In December 2021, we had another falling out when she questioned me about a project that I had finished in October, and got pissed when I could not immediately recall all the details. I mumbled something like, maybe assemble the bill not 2 months after finishing the project, and she blew up. How dare you tell me how to do my work? I know what I'm doing and don't have to put up with a lowly assistant. I left and luckily that was the last day of work in 2021. In 2022, work started with Becky calling me to her and instructing me on how we would proceed in the future. I was not to talk to her while working unless she approached me first, or if we had a scheduled meeting. Also, I was only to talk to her about the tasks she had assigned me, nothing else, as it was not my position to tell her how to do her job. Breaks were fair game. But by then, my interest in making conversation with her had faded. So that's how it went. At this point, I have to mention that as part of my job, I sometimes look at the charts of work that has already been done, how much soil has been brought in, how much of which materials have been used, to get an idea of what needs to be included in a survey. In Picky's lists, I sometimes notice typing mistakes, like the surveyed amount of square meters entered, when the volume cubic meters was demanded, which resulted into high bills, which led to complaints by the client and reduction of the bill. I tried to tell that to Becky, but she stopped me before I really began, pointing out again that I had to focus on my own job, and not to speak to her unless addressed by her first. Okay. For other managers, I would simply have corrected the mistakes after a quick consultation, but for her, nope. In the following months, I noticed a couple of these mistakes in her projects, but I kept my mouth shut. Also did not go to Jack about it because I did not want to appear like I was blackmailing her or something. Over the summer, I noticed more and more mistakes, and how projects that had been finished in the spring had still not been billed. But somehow Picky found the time to go on a summer vacation twice. I noticed undocumented items, false entries, lacking entries, and other mistakes in the lists of her projects, and I said nothing. In early August, she had finally assembled a bill for one of her bigger projects that had been finished months ago, and forbade anyone to talk to her while she worked on the next. Then I received an email. The client who had received the aforementioned bill had rejected it due to the amount of mistakes and lack of confirmability. I have been CC'd as a surveyor, but the problem was not my surveys, but that Becky had not transferred the results correctly. The client denied payment and demanded immediate correction. The sum was around 250,000 euros, money the company had been waiting for months by the time. This was serious, so I decided to break my silence and tell Becky. She saw me through the glass door, and before my hand touched the handle, she yelled, "Don't talk to me!" Well then, what's a girl to do? Wait for about 15 minutes until my super chill boss, who'd been walking his dog over lunch break, returned to his computer. Of course, she had been CC'd as well, and his roar made the walls shake. Jack went to Becky's office and tore her a new one. Afterwards came to me and asked me to please correct the lists as far as I'm able. In the following days, he went through all of Becky's projects, and needless to say, she's gone since September. She wanted me to do everything her way, and I tried to comply with her so much crap. In the end, I complied so much, it got her fired. I was working the front desk at the hotel when the group of sumo wrestlers checked in. They were all dressed in their traditional garb with thick washi belts around their waists and top-knot hairstyles. They stood out among the other guests, but not in a negative way. They were polite and respectful, bowing and thanking me as I checked them in. Their large size and presence commanded attention, but they were humble and soft-spoken, and I couldn't help but feel intrigued by their presence. I could tell they were here for a tournament, and I knew it was going to be an interesting stay for them. A few hours later, Karen checked in. She was loud, demanding, and had a sense of entitlement. She walked up to the front desk, and before I could even greet her, she started complaining about the room she had been assigned, and demanding a room with a better view and a larger bed. Her voice was loud and grating, and she had a condescending tone. She immediately caught my attention, and I knew I was going to have a long shift dealing with her. She was dressed in fancy clothes and had a lot of expensive jewelry, which she flaunted in front of other guests. She had a sense of superiority and acted as if she was entitled to the best of everything. It was clear that she was used to getting what she wanted, and I knew it was going to take a lot of patience and diplomacy to deal with her. As the day went on, Karen spotted the sumo wrestlers in the hotel lobby. She started making fun of their appearance, laughing and pointing at them. She made comments about their traditional clothing and hairstyles, calling them weird and ugly. The wrestlers were sitting together in a corner quietly talking among themselves, and they ignored her. But I could see that they were clearly uncomfortable, their expressions clearly showing the distress they felt. They tried to ignore her, but her comments were loud and could be heard by everyone in the lobby. I could see some of the other guests were also uncomfortable with her behavior and were looking away, trying to distance themselves from the situation. I knew I had to intervene before it escalated any further. So, I approached Karen. "Ma'am, please refrain from making fun of our guests. It's disrespectful and not tolerated here in our hotel." I spoke in a calm but assertive tone, trying to make her understand the gravity of her actions. She turned to me with a sneer. "Why? They are a bunch of weirdos in ridiculous clothes. They don't belong here." She looked around the lobby, trying to find support in the other guests, but all she got were looks of disapproval. I could see that she was not used to being told no, and she was becoming increasingly agitated. I knew at this point that reasoning with her would not be possible, and I decided to take a more stern approach. "Ma'am, your behavior is not acceptable, and if you continue, I will have to ask you to leave the hotel," I said firmly. She looked at me with surprise. "How dare you? Do you know who I am? I'll have you fired for this," she shouted. But I stood my ground, knowing that I had done the right thing by standing up for our guests and the hotel's policies. One of the wrestlers, who spoke broken English, stepped forward and said, "We here for tournament. Please respect our culture." He spoke in a calm and measured tone, trying to make Karen understand that they were in the United States for a purpose, and that her behavior was disrespectful and unacceptable. But Karen was not ready to back down and continued to provoke the wrestlers. She shouted and jeered at them, not caring about the impact of her words. She even pushed one of the wrestlers, not realizing the strength and power they possessed. The wrestler, who had been trying to remain calm, finally had enough and pushed her back with enough force that she stumbled and fell to the ground. The sound of her falling echoed through the lobby, and the guests who witnessed it could see that she was not hurt, but humiliated. The wrestler immediately apologized to her, but she was too angry to accept it. Instead, she lost it even more, and started throwing whatever she could find at the sumo wrestlers from a distance. She was picking up chairs, ashtray, vases, anything she could get her hands on, and throwing them at the wrestlers. The wrestlers were trying to avoid her throws and move away from her, but she was relentless. She was screaming and demanding that the police be called to arrest the weird guys who attacked her. I quickly called the police and explained the situation, providing them with the details of what had just transpired. I also informed them that there was CCTV footage that would show the whole altercation. When the police arrived, they immediately reviewed the CCTV footage and saw the whole incident unfold. They saw how Karen had been the instigator and how she had pushed one of the wrestlers before he pushed her back in self-defense. They verified that Karen was indeed the instigator of the altercation, and after hearing the testimony of the witnesses, they arrested her for disorderly conduct and assault on the sumo wrestlers. The police officers were professional and respectful, but they were firm in their decision to arrest Karen. They took her away in handcuffs, and as she was being led out, she continued to shout and curse, threatening to sue the hotel and the police. The other guests were relieved that the situation was finally over, and many of them approached me to express their gratitude for how I handled the situation. As the police were taking Karen away, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. I could see that she was not used to being told no, and the way she acted was a result of her sense of entitlement. She had never been held accountable for her actions and had never faced consequences for her behavior. I also felt bad for the sumo wrestlers, who had been nothing but polite and respectful throughout the whole incident. They had come to the United States to compete in a tournament and had not deserved to be treated in such a disrespectful way. The story takes place from 2013 till 2019. For backstory and context, in 2013-2014 I was a senior in high school, and my now ex, we will call her Lisa, went to different high schools, about 20 miles apart. We met online, talked and started dating. We talked away after 4 months but got back together after about 6 months. We separated after 4 months but got back together after about 6 months. There were no hard feelings over the first breakup cause we didn't have the time to see one another. We were a year apart, so we were able to go to one another's graduations. It was actually nice since she was sweet and caring back then. We would talk every day and hang out at least 3 to 4 times a week. After Lisa graduated, she got accepted to a university one town over from me, and her first semester was amazing as we would spend nights in her dorm together, and if we went to work while she was at class. Lisa got a part-time job at a pizza shop, and I'd drive her and get pizza. It was simply young love, or so I thought. As co-workers do, she began hanging out with some of hers after work. Didn't bother me. I would go see my friends and let her have fun. They would smoke and drink. At the one night she tried to smoke some stuff, I was uneasy and told her I wasn't thrilled, but she was honest and kept it away from me. In college, stuff like that happens. At this point, Lisa and I have been together for just over 2 years. One afternoon, I dropped her off at the train station on campus for her to go meet friends in the city for the weekend, and I'll pick her up Sunday. Well, Lisa met a drug dealer who ended up at the same party. I was told years later that they hit it off and started talking. Lisa's habits got worse and worse. By this time, I started working night shifts, so I wasn't sleeping over much unless it was a weekend when she wasn't busy with studying. For the next 2.5 years, she was sleeping over at his house when I wasn't around. I started to figure out she was cheating but thought I was insecure. We started fighting more and yelling at one another over every little thing. She would cuss me out if I didn't come over with alcohol when she demanded, and would tell me she'd give me the money but never did. After a few times I just took the money out of her wallet or shoebox where she hid cash. I never told her I took the money. I'd just take 40 out cause she didn't have the extra $1.15. So I started rounding it up. Or I'd take her out of her bank account when she sent me to get money for her so she could buy more coke or pills. She got me to meet her dealer whom I became friends with quickly, and I told him of Lisa's plan to rob him of drugs and money. As he went to another room to get her bag for me to give her, I told him I am not doing blow. So if he wants the money to put some extra baking soda or flour in there for me, he smoked me up and gave me fake drugs for her, which pissed her off. I would also pocket the money cause her dealer didn't want $20 for just baking soda. Lisa's dealer later sees her with her other boyfriend and texts me. Lisa tells him that she was dating the other guy for 2.5 years and she never dated me. At that point, we have been together for going on 5 years. I was crushed. I sat there thinking about how low things have fallen and felt like I was to blame. I let myself be in a mentally and physically abusive relationship. She was using me and I ignored it. My friends felt they couldn't tell me cause I wouldn't listen. My family hated her. I stayed for 6 months after that to get my revenge. I would take money as often as I could. There are upwards of over 1,000 in a short while from her bank, wallet and shoebox. Her aunt left her a car, and she didn't have a license, so I gave an anonymous tip about it. The car was impounded, and she was given a fine. I picked her up to see her crying and loved every second of it. When she got the car back, I put sugar in the gas tank so it wouldn't start and was ruined. And she blamed the lot that impounded the car but didn't have proof. Finally, the summer was over and it was time for her to move back into college for her last year or so, she thought. I took 2 overtime shifts that day, so I couldn't help her move, to which Lisa threw the biggest fit she ever had. I found out her other boyfriend wasn't allowed on campus for being caught with a pound of weed, pills, and a little bit of coke, so Lisa's family moved her in. And that night, I went to see her cause she left stuff in my car, and she had some of my hoodies. As I bring it in, she tells me to put her crap down and leave, because she's having people over, and she needs to shower. So she hops in, and I put her stuff down, grab my hoodies, and anything that's mine, to include her TV, Xbox, all the games and her tablet that I paid for with my own money. I also take pictures of a few bags of weed, pills and coke, with her student's ID badge. Go into the bathroom and tell her that I'm leaving. She just says to leave. No I love you, no drive safe, or see you later. On my way out, I stopped at the campus police station and reported it. I showed them the pictures and what room. They go check it out and her roommate lets them in. They had me ID her so they know they got the right person. Watching her cry was satisfying, and I couldn't help but smile. Well, her other man wasn't too pleased about having his girlfriend kicked out of college, and he threatened me with violence. I spent 3 hours on the phone with him telling him how Lisa and I were together for 5 years as of a month prior before that. We slowly put things together and realized how she played him for drugs and me for rides. I heard on the news they had a fight, and Lisa's other boyfriend was arrested for domestic violence and assault of a police officer. I felt bad for him cause he got 10 years from his anger, assault, domestic abuse, drugs, and unregistered firearm. I don't feel bad for her getting beat by her other boyfriend or being kicked out of school her final year. Shortly after, I met another woman who I vented to about all of this, and I'm now together with for over 3 years, has shown me I'm worth more than that which and deserve to be happy. It is never okay to hit your significant other, nor to verbally abuse them, trust me. If you feel like you're not worth loving, you are wrong. I'd never, with anything I've gone through, raise my hands on anybody when it comes to a relationship. I wish I had left when she started doing drugs, but I didn't. You are worth more than those who abuse you. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.